This walkthrough tutorial is going to be about overlapping action. Now, follow through and overlapping action are principles of animation defined by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston. And it's quite an important principle that a lot of people struggle with. It's a very simple concept that can be difficult to animate if you don't have the proper procedure to follow. So we're going to go over that. So first what we're going to do is take a look at what we'll actually be making once this video is loaded. We're going to take this pendulum, we're going to move it from left to right and have the arms drag and overlap. Play that one more time. Alright, so first we're going to open up Maya and we're going to go to File, Project Window, and we're going to hit New, and we'll type our last name, first name, underscore, overlap, and I'll just save mine to the desktop, hit Accept. Then I'll navigate to my desktop, and we're going to need to download the Ultimate Pendulum version 1. This can be found on the CMCO coursework server under our class, and then rigs, and I think it's under the Simple folder. And I'm just going to copy that, drag it into the Scenes folder right here, paste it right there. And then I'm going to go to File, Create Reference, and I'll find my Ultimate Pendulum and reference it in. Next I'll save, and I'll just call this Overlap. Alright, so let's take a look at the rig first, then we'll talk about the actual concept of overlapping action. So this Ultimate Pendulum here has a master moving control. Similar to the Ultimate Walker, it is a set it and forget it. You'll put your character in place here, and you'll never keyframe it, never move it again. There are 3 pendulum types we can choose from. There's this basic normal one. There is this weird medieval mace pendulum here. And there also is a UFO. For this project, I'll be using normal, but feel free to choose whichever one you'd like. Next we have our main platform control. This will control the translation, and it can also control rotation. We won't be rotating the main platform, but we will be translating it. Then there are 3 rotation controls around each joint here, and they'll each control the rotation below them because it's parented. If you want, you can select all 3 options and you can rotate them at the same time, and we'll be doing that during this project. Alright, so I'm going to switch to my side view here so I can kind of see the setup a little better. I'll select my entire rig here, and what we're going to be doing is we'll select the controls and hit S to set a keyframe. We'll want to make sure that our auto frame is highlighted there in red, your auto key, and then we'll double check our animation preferences. Make sure playback speed is set to 24 FPS, and then under the animation I'll just switch these to auto and hit save. Alright, so the concept of overlapping action is that appendages, tails, antenna, in this case pendulum arms, will drag behind the object that it is attached to. So when we have this this pendulum platform here, it's going to move forward in space, and what will happen is these arms will drag behind as such. And we can do that by selecting these controls and rotating them. So as this object moves like this, those arms will drag back. That's drag. Now when this object stops, like it either hits a wall or it just comes to a stop, these arms will want to then come forward like this. And that simply is because of physics. Objects don't like to move unless a force is acted upon it. So in this case, the main platform here is moving, exerting the force of pulling these arms behind it. and then it'll stop, and similar to how things don't like to move unless things are applied a force to, they don't like to stop unless there's a force to stop them. So in this case, the stopping is just this platform once again coming to a stop. And so these arms will want to just keep moving, keep moving, keep moving until they can't move anymore, and then momentum and inertia will just keep working itself back until it comes to a complete rest. So the idea is really simple, and you might think to yourself, okay, I understand how that works. What's going to happen is the object will move, and I'll set a couple keyframes here to show you an example. Let's say that it moves from 1 to 10, it just moves like this, right? And then as it takes off, the arms will drag back, and as it comes to a stop, they'll fly forward. Now you notice a few problems here. First of all, because of how Maya works, the arms swing before it's even stopped. Plus, there's a feeling of like it lacks weight, it lacks proper physics. And what we can do to fix that is break it down, real simple. So as I mentioned, the concept of this is very, very basic, but oftentimes animators struggle to implement it. So we've got our main poses when it drags, right? So the drag is like this. Drag. That's what happens when the object moves. And then we've got our overlap. That's what happens when the object stops. Overlap. Or overshoot or follow through. The question then becomes, what do we do in between here? And if we let Maya determine that, then what'll happen is it'll just be straight up and down. And we don't want that. We don't want the computer to in between for us. So I'll show you what I mean. If I set a keyframe here, then I go to frame 3, and I reverse it roughly equal, we'll see the computer on frame 2 is pretty much straight up and down. But that's not how overlapping action works. What happens is it's kind of a series of joints, right? So the solution is to add essentially an S-curve. So let me draw this up again. We have our drag, and then we have our follow-through overlap. We need to add a breakdown. The breakdown makes it work. So what the breakdown is going to be is quite simple. It's to combine the drag and the overlapping action into one single drawing here. So the part of the pendulum here that's closer to the action, closer to the movement, will be closer to the overlap, like this. And then the further down you go, the closer it gets to the drag. So we get this kind of roughly S shape here. And that's it. It's really just those 3 poses, those 3 drawings, that will solve our problem. So if I go to frame 2 here, and I'll just pose, to give you a quick example, pose this arm closer, and then these arms back, and you see how we kind of have that S there. So this drawing right here, or pose, is closer to frame 3 up top, but the 2 arms down here are closer to frame 1. And you'll see if I scrub back and forth here, it feels a lot more natural. So if you follow along now, what we're going to do is set things in motion properly. delete my spare keys there. Reset these to 0. Oops. Gotta put it on frame 1. So just to reiterate, stuff closer to the movement mimics the overlap. Stuff further from the movement mimics the drag. And this is applicable to tails and antenna, pendulum arms, pretty much anything, arms, spines. And you might look at this, the way that I'm rotating it back and forth, and think, yeah, that looks like a dog waving its tail, wagging its tail. But if you were to record a dog wagging its tail, you would notice the in-between that we did earlier with that looks a little closer to S. So first, I'm going to select my master control here. And since I'm in auto key, it'll automatically kind of slow in and slow out. I'll zero out all my attributes, and then I'll go from 1 to, let's just say, like 15. And I'll move it forward like this. So let's test the speed of that. It's a little fast. I might move it, so I'll translate it -10. I'll hit play to feel this. Yeah, that's pretty good speed. So what's going to happen here is first I'll draw a line that we can kind of see. Where the arm starts from. And then we're going to rotate, we'll go forward to like maybe frame 4, and we'll start rotating this back a little bit. Now one thing that's really extremely important is pay close attention to the bottommost joint. A common problem is to go forward in time on your timeline and create these rotations, but then if you reverse, you notice how I go to frame 2, and this bottom pendulum arm actually pops back. That doesn't make physical sense because there's nothing applying a force to this to make it jump backward. So you might have to go in here and just kind of smooth it out, make sure that it's still kind of dragging back. We don't want to get any weird pops. Alright, that's pretty good for now. Then it stops around, what, frame 15. So we'll go to frame 10, and we'll bend this all the way like this. That's the most it'll ever drag. Then we'll go to frame 15, and we'll hit S on these 3 arms here. Let me get rid of that. Hit S on these 3 frames. Controls. So now what happens at frame 15 is the object has stopped. So these arms need to start rotating in the opposite direction. So we're going to do this in the most simplified way possible. Starting at frame 15, we'll work our way adding the 3 main keys 1 frame at a time. So we've got this extreme, the extreme drag, and then we'll put on frame 17 the extreme overlap. So this is roughly around -24. We'll make this like, I don't know, negative or positive 23, whatever. And that way we got there is the drag and the overlap. But we need to add that in between. Remember that we've got our drag, we've got our overlap, and the in between needs to look like this, kinda. So I'll select those controls. I'll go to frame 16, so we're kind of working backwards. I'll rotate the top one forward, and I'll flip back and forth using my period and comma buttons to kind of I'll make it like, I don't know, 80% of the way there. So it's rotating to 23. I'll rotate it to like 17 or so. Whatever. And you might notice, you may get a visual glitch here if you see it on my computer, where occasionally, right there we go, these controls are rotating, but the arms are not. So to fix that, it's just a visual glitch. Just jump back and forth between your keyframes or change your viewport. Worst case scenario, save the scene and reopen it, but just flipping your keys should fix it. It's just a visual glitch with this rig. And then, still on frame 16, I'll drag these two back to mimic this drawing a little better, or this pose. So just to give you an example, there's the angle of that. I'll go to frame 16, and I'll make this bottom one closer to that angle, and this middle one kind of in between. And there we go. And that's it. Those three drawings, nothing else. It's that simple. We haven't worked out our timing yet, so obviously there's no in-betweens from the keyframes. We just have our extremes and our breakdowns. And we're just going to keep adding those three drawings back and forth until eventually this thing comes to a complete rest. So it rotates on 17 to overlap around, I've got it like 23. I'll go forward to frame 19 and I'll rotate all of these arms in the opposite direction, not quite as much as it was before. So it was previously negative 25-ish. I'll make this negative 18, 17, whatever. And then we need to add our breakdown once again. And what we'll do is we'll grab this top arm, make it closer to that negative 18, but not quite. Negative 15 is fine. Take these two, rotate them back. Once again, for my own sake, I'll draw a line here to see the angle. This is just a tool. It's called Annotate Pro. You can get a free trial for 30 days. And I'll jump forward to frame 18. Kind of angle that bottom one closer to that, not quite all the way. Meet this one in the middle. And you see if I scrub back nice and slow, it's going to keep going back and forth. So I'll select all three again. 19 is our extreme drag. Slowly it's losing inertia, it's losing momentum. Jump forward to frame 21, go back to our extreme overlap. Not quite as extreme as it was previously. So previously it was 23.6. We'll make this one like 17-ish. Then we'll go back to frame 20. Arrange this one closer to 17. These two back. This one even more back. Kind of in between here. For the duration of this, I'm going to be using a in-betweening tool. Now this specific tool you don't have access to, however, there is a script that you can download on this website here. It's called creativecrash.com, or sorry, creativecrash.com, and the script is called Tween Machine. And what it does is, if you set a keyframe, I'll show you. It basically does exactly what I'm about to do here. So I've got my extreme overlap. I'll go forward 2 frames to 23. Add the extreme drag back. Not quite as extreme as the one previously, maybe negative 10. And I'll go back to my breakdown here. And what the tool will do, if I select this top control, I want it to be most of the way there. So instead of it being halfway, I'll click 7/8 of the way there, and it'll pop it. It'll pop it right into the 7/8 of the way direction. So Tween Machine will essentially do the same thing. It's got a little dragger here where you can tell it which of these keyframes to favor. And then I want this middle one to favor 3/8 of the way, and then this back one to favor 1/8 of the way. Right, so I'll select those controls, and you'll have to manually do this for now, just the same way. I'll manually do it again just to remind you. We're going to go to frame 25, add in our next extreme overshoot, go back to frame 24, and manually drag this one here, and then manually drag these ones back. Or in my case, I'll hit the in-betweens. Then we'll go to frame 27. We're dwindling this down now. I'll drag it to, what was the previous one? -10. We'll do this one around -5. Go to the in-between. This top one's gonna favor the next pose. The middle one's gonna be roughly halfway in between, but a little bit favoring the previous pose. And then this bottom one will mostly favor the previous pose. Alright, select those all again. I'll jump forward to frame 29. This thing's really dwindling down now, so I'll put it at like 3 or so. Go back to 28 to add my in-betweens. Select all 3 again. Go to 31. This is almost done. Put it at like -1. Go to the in-betweens. Add my breakdowns. Select these all again. Go to 33, and it's just about done. Right? Add my breakdown. Then I'll go to 34. And I'll just, one last time going forward here. Oops, sorry, not 34. 35. Drag it back a little bit. Right about. We'll just type in -0.5. Go back to my breakdown at 34. Favor the poses. The top one favors the overshoot. The middle one partially favors the drag. And the bottom one definitely favors the drag. Then we'll go to frame 37. And I'll just zero these out. Need to add my breakdown once again at 36. Top one's going to favor previous, or the upcoming pose. Middle one's going to mostly favor the previous pose. Bottom one's going to mostly favor the previous pose. So now, if I just kind of manually drag back and forth here, you can kind of get a feeling of how this works. It's not perfect, but it looks pretty good. And we can always go in here and edit these. We can make them more extreme. We can do all sorts of crazy stuff to it. But then you'll notice what's going to happen if I hit play. Since we added the keys in consecutively there and there's no in-betweens, it's not going to look very natural. It's going way too fast. So considering how slow this pendulum moves, I'm going to add some in-betweens. And we're just going to do that by dragging the keyframes. So I'll select these 3 controls. So there's a few ways we can do this. None of them are super clean unless you have a script to space keyframes apart. But what we can do is on our timeline, we can hold Shift, then we can drag. So click in your time frame in front of all these keyframes. Hold Shift, drag to the left, and select all the keyframes except 15 there. And we're going to go click on these middle arrows, and we're going to go 1, 2, 3. We'll see how that turns out. Click away. Shift drag all of them up to frame 20. 1, 2, 3. Shift drag all of them up to 24. 1, 2, 3. Shift drag all these up to 28. 1, 2, 3. And if your numbers aren't lining up with me, you may have put your keyframes in a different location, but it's the same concept. Select all of your keyframes except for the one you don't want to move, and move it 1, 2, 3. We're going to see if that timing works out. So I'm going to pause my recording, and I'm just going to fill this out, so you might want to pause the video and just catch up here. Okay, so I spaced out all my keyframes 3 frames apart. So if you followed along previously and you followed the same pattern, your last keyframe on these 3 controls should be at 103. If it's not exactly, don't worry about it too much. We'll just kind of test it out. So I'm going to hit back here. I'm going to hit play. And it's not perfect. I might tighten the spacing up a little bit, or the timing rather. I might have 2 frames in between instead, but we get the general idea of how this works. It's all about your extremes, the drag here, and the overshoot, and most importantly, the breakdown in between, where the top favors the overshoot and the bottom favors the drag. If you have these three poses here, in any of your overlapping action that you try and accomplish, you will have a very strong foundation for that overlap. There's always room for polish, like maybe you want to tighten the spacing, or maybe you want the poses to be stronger, or maybe you need it to slow in and slow out at certain points. But the general concept of overlapping action works. It's functional. We look at this and it makes sense. That could very easily be a dog wagging its tail. That could be, a pendulum arm. Any of those things are applicable. Let's try one more exercise with this rig. We'll go ahead and go to frame 103, select all of our keys, and hit S. Then I'm going to expand this here. You can always type in numbers. I'll go to frame like 110, hit S again, and we're going to treat this as if it were like a spine instead. So I'm going to select this main control on 110. I'm going to rotate it up like this, 180 degrees. I'll zoom in, select all these controls, make sure they hit S, go to 115, hit S, and then I'm going to fix up my timeline down here. So in this box I'll type in 1110. That way I don't see any of the previous stuff. So let's say that this is the spine of a character who's going to bow. Okay? Same concept. So I'll go to frame 115. Actually, you know what? We could probably just delete that. So since we're on 110, same thing. I'll select all these controls, right-click over 115, hit delete. Make sure frame 110, everything is selected. Hit S. Zero these out. Rotate this 180 degrees. Alright, so we got our pose here, and we want this spine to bow. So I'll go forward to frame, let's say, 118. I'm going to select these three controls, and I'm going to bring them forward as if the spine has bowed forward. Then I'll go to my breakdown, which will be at 114, and we're going to do the same thing. The part that's closer to the action will reach there faster, and then these parts will drag behind. The top one will definitely drag behind. This one's kind of in between here. Kind of flip back and forth. And if we play that, you'll see. And it's kind of floppy. You know, if we had a head here, the head wouldn't necessarily flop at the same rate. And then we'll go to a frame like 124. Hit S to hold it. Maybe bring it forward a little bit more for that cushion. And then if we want the spine to come back up, we'll go up to frame, let's see, 32, and we'll zero these out. Go to frame 128, which is the breakdown. We'll favor this bottom one closer to 0. We'll favor these two closer to the opposite, especially this top one. And then we'll see how that looks. So it's going to bow, come back up. Alright. Now if you'd like, you can treat this as if it were, let's say, a dog tail. It'll be really easy. I'll show you how to copy and paste some keyframes. So I'll select all of my keyframes, on 132, hit S. I'll go forward to like frame 140, hit S. Go down here, type in 140, and we're gonna control these. Go to frame 146, rotate them in this direction by, let's say 15. Go to the in-between 143, favor this one toward that pose, so it'll be around 13. This one, mostly the previous one, so around 5. And the end, mostly the previous pose, around 1 or 2. Or sorry, the previous pose, yeah. Actually, we need to, my mistake, since we started off at a flat here, we need to drag this manually. Like this here. There we go. So frame 1, or frame 140, we got a flat tail. Frame 143, we got to rotate this top part of the tip back, middle one kind of favoring mostly, and then this bottom one mostly favoring the front. Maybe rotate these a little more. Alright, and then we'll go to frame 152, and I'll rotate these in the opposite direction, negative 15 or so, 16. Go back to frame 149, and we need to make sure to add our proper breakdown. So the base of the tail will favor frame 152 by a lot. The middle part will favor 146, mostly, partially halfway, and then the tip will favor 146 even more. And now we got our tail wag. So we can select these 3 controls, and we can now, let's see here. Actually, we'll need to add one more set. Yeah. So go to frame 158 and hit S. And I'll show you why in a second. We're going to show you how to copy and paste frames. Really nifty. So hit S, and you'll notice that it's frozen there. Go to frame 146, which is our extreme. Select all your controls. Middle mouse over 146, middle mouse hold, and drag to 158. And then let go. Then hit S, and you're going to see some magic. What that did is that copied and pasted that there. Alright? So go to 155, and we're going to need to add our breakdowns again. So the base of the tail favors 158 mostly. The middle favors 152 partially, halfway. And then the tip really favors 152. Alright? So now we've got our back and forth. So I'm going to select these 3 again. And starting with frame 149, I'm going to shift click 149, go up to 160 or whatever, go to right click, copy, and then go to frame 161, right click, paste, and then paste. And then you can just do that again. Go forward, 1, 2, 3, right click, paste, paste. Go to last frame, 1, 2, 3, paste, paste. Now we got our dog wag tail. And it's a little rigid, but it gives you the idea of overlapping action. So I can zoom this back out to frame 1, all the way to frame 200, and we can see what we've got. All sorts of crazy stuff. And there you have it. So please make sure to save your file. Let's go to Show, uncheck NURBS Curves, we'll go to View, Camera Settings, Resolution Gate, and we're going to just make sure that we kind of see everything here. Tighten your camera roughly like this. Go to your render settings up here. Scroll down to image size. Oops. Click on HD 720. Hit close. Once you've framed this up properly, we're going to go to View, Camera Settings, No Gate. Now we're going to right click over the timeline, Play Blast, hit the options box. Make sure that our format is Qt if you're on Windows. If you're on a Mac, I believe it's AV Foundation. Encoding if you're on Windows. PNG if it's on a Mac, I believe it's H.264. You can also do H.264 on the Windows, but I just leave it at PNG. Quality, if you have the option, scroll it all the way up. Scale, if you have the option, scroll it all the way up. Frame padding, don't worry about it. For now, make sure that it says Remove Temporary Files checked. Uncheck Save to File, because we're going to test it first. And then hit Play Blast. And give it a second. And we will watch our Play Blast once it pops up. If you want, if you're in QuickTime, you can go to View Loop. On a Mac, it's probably Command L. Hit play, and we can watch what we did. And see if you can just understand the extremes and the breakdown. It's just those three simple things: your extreme drag, your breakdown, and your extreme overlap. And just remember, the part of the tail or whatever that's closer to the action is going to favor the overlap, and then the further down you go, the more it'll favor the drag, creating that S in between. So we like this, so we're going to go close it, go back to Maya, right click over the timeline, hit Play Blast, scroll down, make sure to check Save to File. We'll just name it Overlap, whatever, and hit Play Blast one more time. This time it'll actually save the video in the proper place. Feel free to test out overlaps in different ways if you'd like to get creative and see how you might think the object would move, how the overlapping would work if this object was moving up and down, because that affects all sorts of things too. If your object is moving up and down, then these have to drag up and down. And I highly recommend checking out video reference or filming stuff and just get creative. Let me know if you have any questions. If you have something you want to show me, hit a Play Blast, and then we're going to save everything and take your entire which folder? The entire overlap, your last name, first name overlap folder, and we're going to put it in the CMCO coursework server under in-class assignments and turn it in.